Today we're going to be talking about tree development. And tree development is, similar to plant development, but there are a couple different differences that we're going to recognize and we're going to look at. So trees or woody plants, woody plants are going to kind of include trees, shrubs, and vines. They're going to go through what's called a primary and a secondary growth. All plants go through what's called a primary growth, and that is simply the growth of roots and stems. So like flowers, grasses, things like that, they're going to go through the primary growth, but they're not going to go through the secondary growth that we see in these woody plants, and especially we're going to be focusing in on trees today. Because again, when you look around you, depending on where you're at, there's most likely going to be a lot of trees unless you're in a desert. But the trees, they go through quite a bit to result in something that can stand for, in some cases, many years, perhaps hundreds of years, and stand and withstand all of the environmental conditions and changes and freezing and thawing and all of those different things. So in order to build a structure that's going to be able to withstand that, it can't be something that's simply slopped together and you expect it to stand 100 feet tall for 100 years. And so there's a very systematic way that these parts are put together to ensure that you have something that's very sturdy, which is going to be able to withstand whatever nature throws at it. With, of course, exceptions like, tornadoes and things like that. They're not built to withstand that, but sometimes they do. So we're going to start by talking about some tissue which is called meristems. Meristems are tissues that are made of cells that divide really quickly, and they are at the top and bottom of the plant. The apical meristem is at the tips of roots, and this is what enables plants to grow length. So it's going to lengthen the plant's root system and allow the plant to kind of stretch itself out. So the meristem also eventually grows up and becomes a shoot. So when we're talking, the very, very start, we've got to get everything going. So if we're talking about growing a tree, we've got to have a root system because we've got to feed that growing sapling, right? So we've got to have a lot of water. We've got to be able to gather nutrients. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is through a well-established root system. So if you've ever seen, an older tree, the root system is very elaborate. The roots look like trees themselves. You have a network almost as big underground as what you see above ground, because when you're feeding something that large, you have to have a really good system to get all those nutrients and all that water up to the different parts of the tree. So a plant is going to have that meristem, and that's going to allow it to kind of, like I said, lengthen out and get the plant shoot going in the first place. The plant is going to have rings inside of primary xylem and primary phloem. And are going to go up and down. They're going to grow up and down with the meristem, and they're really important in transporting water and nutrients to the rest of the plant. So once we get that established, we've got our xylem, we've got our phloem, the meristem is lengthening things out. We're going to go into that secondary growth, which is how plants develop the woody tissue and how they grow in circumference. So the meristem is going to help them grow in length. The secondary growth is going to give us that woody tissue, which allows us to grow in circumference. So a tree can, not just be a little sapling, but can actually have some circumference and girth to it. So this is accomplished through what are called lateral meristems. In between the primary xylem and the phloem is a ring called the vascular cambium. And this is a single meristem, which is only one cell layer thick. To continue this secondary growth of layer of cells, we're going to grow from the vascular cambium. As the layer grows, it eventually gives rise to the secondary xylem, to the inside, and secondary phloem to the outside. The secondary xylem is the wood of the tree, shrub, or vine, and the new layers are added to the inside, which with each year of growth. So the secondary phloem doesn't add layers, it just thickens. So the xylem is going to continue to add those new rings. The phloem is just going to add thickness as it grows there. As a tree matures and grows secondary tissues, the outer layer epidermis is shed and a new layer called a cork grows. Mature cork cells are dead and they have thick waxy walls that protect the inner tissues. The cork cambium is a meristem layer just under the cork. The cork cambium produces more cork and some sloughs off, which causes the cracks that you see in bark. So when you look at a tree closely, you're going to see that the bark kind of looks damaged in ways. That is a result of this cork essentially sloughing off. So where the cork breaks off, when you look at a tree, it almost looks like the tree's been in a fight. That's just simply because that cork is sloughing off and exposing the cracks that are left behind when the cork leaves. Bark, by definition, is anything external of the vascular cambium. So if it exists outside of that vascular cambium, it's bark. And bark serves a variety of purposes. It's going to protect the tree, right? It's going to protect the part that's growing. And so you've got a lot of bugs, you've got a lot of animals like squirrels and birds and other organisms that are living in trees. So they're crawling around on something essentially that's dead, and so that's not hurting the tree, right? So they can put their claws into it, they can put their beaks into it, they can dig around in it, and it's really not hurting the functioning parts of the tree, right? If that stuff were going on inside the tree where we're trying to transport nutrients and water and all those types of things, then the tree would never survive. But by having this outer coating, all these activities can take place with all these different organisms, and it doesn't really impact the health of the tree, because if the bark is removed, there's just going to be new bark to replace it. So like I said, the animals aren't doing damage to the tree when they're coming in contact with the bark. As layers are added, the older layers of phloem and cork die and are pushed to the edges, and they make bark. So like I said, as the tree continues to expand and grow, these layers that were once that made up the functioning part of the tree, they get pushed to the edge. It's somewhat similar to like coral, but coral's a little bit different because those are different organisms. But on a coral reef, the new coral is growing on top of the old dead calcified remains. So we're just pushing the old dead stuff out, and it becomes a protective layer. The new rings inside then of secondary phloem and cork cambium, then they can be created, and again, they're doing the functioning part of the tree while the bark is just kind of there as a protective layer, again, it was once functioning, and now it just has a different function, but it's dead. The different layers of a trunk are based on what is living and what is dead. The center darker part is called the heartwood, and it is made of older layers of secondary xylem, and they no longer transport anything because they're filled with a resin. So the lighter rings outside of that are called sapwood, and they are the living part of the secondary xylem. So lots of different layers that go into a tree, lots of different component parts. The wood ray is the layer between those rings, and that's what's going to transport the water and nutrients and aid in wound repair. Because if you've ever noticed, a tree will heal itself. If you make a mark on a tree, it will stay there for a while, but it won't stay there forever. Because what's happening is those layers that are on the inside, they continually keep getting pushed out, and they're going to replace that old mark. So if you make you make a mark on a tree, it'll stay there for a while, but as time passes, that whatever you carve there is eventually going to fade because it's going to fill in with new material. So it has almost like a self-healing property just because of the way that these cells and the setup of this tree is going to work. Again, all of this is designed to create a structure that can withstand wind, rain, whether the ground is going to shift. If you think about what has to go into a plant, especially a large tree, in order to withstand winds of 50, 60 miles an hour, right? Most of us wouldn't be able to stand up in a wind of 50, 60 miles an hour, especially if we were 100 feet tall, right? So if you're 100 feet tall, those roots have to run incredibly deep. They're in the ground to provide the nutrients and the water, but they're also in the ground to literally root the plant to make sure that it doesn't fall over when strong wind gust comes along, right? Because it's going to take all that soil, and it's holding that soil in place, but it's also holding that tree in place. And so trees are incredibly durable, incredibly stable. because of all the different steps that go into creating them. As I said in the beginning, it's not something that's simply thrown together like a grass or something like that, and it's not tall enough to have to worry about the wind. When you're building something, a structure like a tree that's going to maybe stand for 60, 70, or 100 years, you've really got to take care in the way that it's designed. And that's why when we look around and we see the way that trees are designed, it's a very careful process that results in an organism that is able to withstand just about anything nature throws at it. I'll see you next time.